When you live your day-to-day life on a regular basis, no matter how much money or success you have or don't have, your level of happiness is mostly going to be dictated by the quality of your relationships. If you are only being surrounded by people you hate, that you can't communicate with, and who keep arguing with you, then money or success is not really going to change anything about that. And I have met people like this who seemed like having a lot of success, and when you see their personal life, it is a mess. And on the reverse, when you have a strong group of people who support you, who uplift your mood every time because they make you laugh, they are being supportive, they have some friendly manners with you, then even tough times, even really difficult times, they will pass by much more easily because you can rely upon others. There was even a study on a TED conference that explained that among the people on the planet who live the longest, the only real criteria they could identify for what makes them live longer is their strong social roots. How much connected you are to other human beings and how well you can maintain those connections dictate how much happiness and how much health even you have in life. So since the quality of your relationships is mostly going to be dictated by how well you can communicate with people around you, because even the person you love the most in the world, that person at some point you are going to enter in conflict with them, or they may have a beef with you. And in that case, if you can't handle communication or the conversation easily, then you might lose relationships. On the reverse, you can enhance the relationships around you by developing better communication skills. And that is the topic of this video. So what does create conflict? When you have a conflict with a loved one, with your friend, with your with colleagues at work, what exactly creates conflict? Usually, it is created by the lack of saying what you have to say, or the lack of clarification of what exactly am I trying to say to that person. And it's always because something hasn't been clearly said and swallowed, and you can't get past the emotional barrier garbage like accumulating in you, so you're stuffing down feelings, and at some point it may explode, and that will cause a much bigger problem in the relationship than if you had just said what you had to say early on. Or it might be because there is an emotion or negative past event that hasn't been fully digested, which is related, but let's say that may even be something way back ago, something that happened way back long ago, and you still haven't fully processed what happened, and either it happened with that person you are in conflict with, or it happened with somebody who looks like them, somebody who relates to them or to the situation you have been a victim of somehow, if you frame it that way. And in that case, those are the things we need to clarify so that the conflict can be handled. And I made a small example to exemplify this on a manual you can find down below to explain the root foundations of magical linguistics and how can you use that technology to solve a conflict and problem in your regular life. Let's say somebody tells you, well, we can't speak anymore, we can't say anything anymore because of the political movements right now, we can't speak anymore. I'm saying that because I had a conversation with somebody at some point who claimed that, and the conversation I am putting right now in front of your screen is kind of the one I had with that person, and we clarified that actually, yes, you can speak, but it is all about how did you frame that in your mind. So basically that person said, we can't say anything anymore, and my first challenge, my first question was, who exactly, out of clarification, who exactly does not let you speak? Because I'm not really sure how it is happening in my life. Most people I hang out with, they let me speak. So if that is not the case in your life, can you be more clear on who exactly is not letting you speak? He was kind of evasive, but ultimately he got to the point, well, my wife. Obviously, dude, no shit, I told you it was all about your personal relationships. It's never about the world, the Trump, the economy. It's always about people close to you that can make your life suffer the most or not. So he said, well, my wife keeps reading those things on Twitter or X. She says everyone should be gay by now. Obviously, I guess that's not what she meant exactly, the words she used, but he framed it that way. Therefore, I challenged, okay, fine, just to be clear, is being gay a bad thing? And that may be the case in that person's mind, but I would just get some clarification. Is being gay a bad thing for you? And he said, well, no, I know gay guys, I don't care, it's not my problem. I would just like her to finally understand we can all have our preferences, for God's sake. And I said, okay, so there is an inference, I'm not really quite sure of how it works here. So does talking about homosexuality, gay or whatever, mean that you can't have your own preferences? How can this lead to that? I'm not really sure how that works. And when I challenge beliefs like these cause and effect structures, people start unveiling much deeper information that I can work with in coaching or whatever. So then he said, well, no, it is just that I don't want her to believe everything she's reading. I said, okay, so still not clear to me. What is the worst case scenario, resulting outcome? What is the worst case scenario that would eventually happen if she were to believe everything she is reading? Then what would happen? Because apparently there is some massive frustration or even fear coming from you in your head. What would that equal to? Let's say she believes everything, then what? Then what will happen? And ultimately he revealed, finally, after 15 minutes of conversation, revealed the main problem that had nothing to do with we can't say anything anymore because of Trump or because of whatever. Nothing to do with that. It was much simpler. It was, well, I am afraid that she influences our kids to want to change their sex or go through some surgery at 11 years old. I don't want her to influence our children. And that was the real concern that somehow he could not articulate because of whatever reason. Maybe he had been shut down in his life and now he felt like he was not allowed to speak freely. In any case, he was worried about the future of his children. Fine, now we have something tangible we can work on. But the crazy thing is, all I had to tell him to finally release the knot, the emotional knot, was, okay, so if the whole problem is simply about your children and their obvious sexuality, then how can you communicate with your wife so that she understands your concern? Because considering the behavior you have had so far, I am guessing you haven't even put that on the table. You haven't even mentioned that concern to her directly. You complain about it to your friends and to me, but you didn't really articulate that with her specifically. And I didn't even have to make any other argument. He conceded. He said, oh, well, I guess I could just say that. And, well, it doesn't really sound that hard, actually. He was reassured because now we get into concrete details. What specifically, for God's sake, can you just say out loud to finally resolve the conflict? Because most of the conflicts you have come from the things you don't say, not from the things you say. He was definitely relieved, and that made me also reflect upon the use of magical linguistics. Which of those language patterns are the most useful depending on the situation? And I would say that all the ones on the above, the alternative map, alternative use, meta frame, those are much more confrontational and more geared at serious conversation where you are opposing resistance on purpose. Maybe it is at work and your boss is a douchebag and you have to maintain resistance, or when you are arguing on very highly technical topics. And on the other side, if you simply want to resolve a conflict with a loved one, then I would definitely go more, like in that example, into intention and specifics. Even just specifics alone. As you can see, that conversation with the guy was handled through specifics alone at the end. How can you communicate about your fear to your wife? Does that sound like some impossible thing to handle because the government is preventing you from thinking of... No, it is just something. What specifically can you say to your wife to make her understand? First of all, what do you want to tell her, and how can you communicate that so that she understands? Does that sound like an impossible thing to do? And if that is, if literally every time you try to communicate with her, she never lets you speak, then that might be a toxic relationship, and those are the kind where I go much more confrontational. You have some other videos on my channel if you want to figure out more of this. And with that being said, all this document, this manual with the breakdown of that conversation and all the ways to use magical linguistics to open the mind of people is contained down below. It is a manual I just finished writing a few days ago, and you can find that to guide your own thinking and language process if you want to open your mind and open the mind of people you are interacting with, so that you create better relationships in your life instead of constantly being in opposition to everyone who thinks the slightest microscopic thing differently than you do. You have this down below. Be my guest if you want to check that. I'm glad to have you here as always, and see you soon in the next video.